I told my husband to stop grabbing me every time I walked by. Just once, I asked to be treated like a person instead of a fantasy. That was 6 months ago. Since then, he hasn't kissed me, touched me, or even looked at me like he used to. And now he says he's leaving. Because I ruined how he loved me. I'm Destiny. I'm 29, and my entire marriage just exploded because apparently asking for basic human decency makes me some kind of monster. My husband, Robert, is 31, and we've been married 3 years, together for 7 total. I genuinely thought we had this amazing relationship until 6 months ago when everything went completely sideways. Let me start from the beginning so you understand what I'm dealing with here. Robert works for some shipping company doing logistic stuff, and I handle patient scheduling at a medical clinic. We're not rich, but we're doing okay. Own our little house. Both have reliable cars. The whole suburban dream thing. On paper, Robert is exactly what every woman says she wants. He's faithful, responsible, pays his bills, doesn't gamble or drink too much, comes home every night. Sounds perfect, right? But here's what nobody tells you about the perfect husband: sometimes perfect can drive you absolutely insane in ways you never saw coming. When Robert and I first got together, I was head over heels for how attentive he was. He was constantly touching me, always had his hands on me, always telling me how beautiful and sexy I was. Every time I walked past him, he'd grab my butt or pull me in for a kiss. He'd whisper dirty things in my ear while I was trying to cook dinner. He made me feel like I was the hottest woman alive just for existing. At first, this was incredible. My friends were all jealous because their boyfriends barely noticed when they got dressed up. And here was Robert acting like I was some kind of supermodel just for wearing pajamas. He'd get turned on just from hugging me goodbye in the morning. He'd make comments about my body constantly, how good I looked in certain outfits, how much he wanted me, how he couldn't keep his hands off me. It was flattering and made me feel so desired and wanted. But somewhere around year 4 or 5, it started getting exhausting. Like really, really exhausting. I couldn't do anything without Robert making it sexual somehow. I couldn't hug him without feeling him get hard against me. I couldn't bend over to pick something up without him making some comment about my body. I couldn't even be sick with a flu without him still finding ways to touch me inappropriately. It was like he couldn't see me as anything other than a walking sex object. The breaking point was really building for months. I work in healthcare administration, which is honestly one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. I'm dealing with insurance companies, angry patients, doctors who think they're God, mountains of paperwork, constant deadlines, people literally crying in my office because they can't afford their medications. I come home mentally and emotionally drained, just wanting to exist as a human being for 5 minutes without being somebody's fantasy. But Robert would be there waiting, ready to pounce the second I walked through the door. Not in a sweet "how was your day, honey?" way, but in a "you look so hot" in that uniform way that made me want to scream. He never asked about my actual day. Never wanted to hear about the problems I was dealing with. Never offered to help with anything stressful in my life. But he sure as hell never missed an opportunity to comment on my appearance or grab some part of my body. I started dropping hints that maybe he could tone it down a little. When he'd make sexual comments, I'd change the subject or give him a look. When he'd grab my butt while I was loading the dishwasher, I'd move away and keep working. When he'd get visibly aroused during completely innocent moments, I'd make little jokes about how predictable men are. I thought he'd pick up on the fact that I needed some space, some time to just exist without being sexualized every 5 minutes. But Robert kept doing it: the constant touching, the sexual comments, the inability to have a normal conversation without making it about my body somehow. It was like he was physically incapable of seeing me as a complete person instead of just a collection of body parts that existed for his entertainment. Are men really so controlled by their hormones that they can't interact with their own wives without making everything sexual? I tried talking to my sister about it, and she just laughed and said, I was lucky to have a husband who still found me attractive after 7 years. But she doesn't understand what it's like to never have a moment where you're seen as a person instead of an object. She doesn't know what it feels like to come home from dealing with real problems all day only to be treated like a stress relief toy by the person who's supposed to support you. My coworkers weren't much help either. When I mentioned that Robert was a little too hands-on, they'd roll their eyes and say their husbands barely looked at them anymore. But that's not the point. The point is that there's a difference between feeling desired and feeling objectified. And Robert had crossed that line a long time ago. I started paying attention to how Robert interacted with other people versus how he interacted with me, with his friends, his coworkers, random people at the store. He was thoughtful and engaging. He asked questions, listened to answers, had real conversations about actual topics. But with me, everything somehow circled back to my appearance or how much he wanted me physically. It was like he'd forgotten I had a brain, opinions, feelings that weren't related to his sexual needs. 6 months ago, I was having the worst week of my entire career. Our computer system crashed, and we lost a bunch of patient files, which meant I was staying late every night trying to recover data while dealing with panicked doctors and angry office managers. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and honestly just trying to get through basic household tasks without having a complete breakdown. I was in our bedroom sorting through Robert's work shirts when he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He started kissing my neck, which might have been sweet, except I could immediately feel him getting hard against my back. In that moment, something inside me just completely snapped. Here I was, dealing with actual crisis situations at work, barely keeping my head above water, and Robert's response was to treat me like some kind of stress relief toy. Instead of asking if I needed help or support, I turned around, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I'm so sick of you constantly sexualizing me. It's honestly disgusting." The words came out harsher than I'd planned, but I was just done.